Hi, Sandra here from Creating Spain, and today I'm going to show you how to use cheap acrylic paints to do background blending. And I'm sorry for the state of my fingers. I have been playing so they have got somewhat coloured. Okay, I've got a few supplies here. Firstly, let me give you a tip. This is just a small jar of Vaseline that I keep in my craft room. And before I open up these tubes, what I do is, and I do this with all my tube paints, I put a tiny bit of Vaseline around the thread there. The reason for that is because it makes it so much easier to open your paints the next time round, whether you've left it a day, a week or a year. The Vaseline helps it to not gum up and stick to itself. So, worth knowing. I also have a little drop of glycerin. I cannot stress enough how important glycerin is in the craft room. It has so many different uses. I have a big bottle and I just decant it into this one for ease of use. I have some card discs. It's standard, cheapo, 250 gram card. Nothing special about it whatsoever. I have some pieces of sponge. Now when I say sponge, I bought this for 60 cents. It's designed to go in the bottom of a fridge to stop your fruit and veg getting all wet. I obviously don't use it for that. I use it in the craft room instead. And I've cut a couple of squares. As you can see, I've been playing, and I've got one which is in blue and I've got one which is in red and orange. Now you can, if you wish, use a bath sponge. You want one, if you can, that's nice and close, not full of really big holes. Baby sponges are probably the best. And if you want to, you can squeeze it up. You can put a little elastic band around it. You can even attach it to either a cotton reel if you use it flat, or if you get these chunky straws, you can actually glue it into a straw to make a handle for it. And it's up to you whether you wash them and reuse them or whether you just throw them away once they're used. It's your personal preference. I have a wet wipe just to clean my fingers off and to clean off my tile. I have a glass coaster to put my paint on. And the reason I use that is because it's small, it's flat, it's easy to clean off. Now the difference with your watercolours or with acrylic or with oil, acrylic will dry on a glass tile and it will stay there. You'll literally have to scrub it off if that gets well and truly dried. So do wash it off after you've finished work. So you have a choice with the glycerin because this form of blending doesn't work without the glycerin. You get a lot of streaks and it doesn't blend too well. You can either put it directly onto your sponge and just work it in with your fingers, or you can put it onto a tile or your surface, whatever it is you're using, piece of plastic, whatever. And you can simply bunch up your sponge and dip it in. Now I'm using these colours this morning. This one is Naples yellow. It's a very funny looking Naples yellow. That looks like a very pale peach to me. This is orange yellow, which is definitely orange, and I'm going to put that one well away. And finally I have scarlet. I love bright colours. There we go. So you do this in a very similar manner to I use this one because it's the right colour scheme, to every other way that you do your blending, except that with this case you dip your sponge in. If you've not already done it, you dip it in the glycerin. And I go from light to dark. So my first one is this Naples yellow. Dab it off onto a piece of paper to take any excess off, and then blend away. There we are. Easy peasy. Now I'm going to go for the orange next. So dab it into my orange paint. Dab off the excess again. There we go. And finally the red. Now this being a very strong colour, I probably need very, very little of it. Move my finger out of the way. Now I've put some phthalo blue on here and I have the red as well. I'm going to start off with the phthalo blue, tamp it down on my paper and do that. Add some red. And then we get a purpley sort of colour, which is quite nice. And then because I actually want red and no blue in it, I'm going to use a different dabber and go for the red. Move my finger out of the way. There we are, so another effect. Now, a word of caution on this, you need to make sure that it's dry. If you're going to heat emboss anything on this, make sure it's thoroughly dry. And check first, because although acrylic paints dry very, very fast normally, you've added glycerin into the mix, which will slow things down somewhat. So you need to make sure it's thoroughly dry, or else your embossing powder will end up sticking to it in places that you don't want. Now, these particular paints were cheap and cheerful from a Chinese shop, i.e. something like a dollar store if you're in the States, or a pound shop if you're in the UK. And these are perfectly good paints for doing all sorts of artwork, unless you are a fine artist and you're selling your work. These are perfectly good. And I've got a set of about 24, and I think they cost me something like €2 or €3. And this will last a very long time using the kind of quantities that you see me use this morning. One difference that you need to know about using the acrylics for this method is that the popular technique of splashing water over this to create little variations in colour won't actually work. So here you can see a selection of backgrounds that I've done using this method. This is my glass tile now that I have finished. Just get a wet wipe and that's it. So clean up is pretty much a breeze.